This episode of Where Did the Road Go is brought to you in part by our Patreons. In particular, this month is being sponsored by Lindsay Marie Trebet and Nick Martin. I thank you both so very much. And if you want to become a patron, you can do so at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
All right, so I'm speaking with Jamie Kimball, and you're out on the West Coast, right?
Yes, I am. I'm in Central California.
And you have had a lifetime of weird experiences, as you've told me.
I have, yeah, definitely.
You had initially written us about sleep paralysis one.
Correct. So, I mean, I have earlier on, prior to the sleep paralysis experience, I did have some things with, I've seen some entities, I've seen some ghosts. I've had a pretty traumatic experience when I was just turned 13 that I actually had wanted to speak to you about, which deals with Kundalini, but okay. I don't know if you want me to speak about that first, since that's chronologically kind of happened.
Sure.
Prior to some of this stuff.
You could start with that.
Okay. So when I was young, I kind of did the wild thing. I started drinking at a very young age. So we're talking like 10, 11, 12. I was pretty hardcore at that point, already drinking. And at the age of just turning 13, so exactly prior to Father's Day, it was the day before, older kids next door to our house were having a party, and I was friends with them, and they kind of thought it was cool to have the younger kid over who could consume large amounts of alcohol. It was kind of one of those, it's like keep giving the kid more and more drinks. And I suffered from blackouts when I drank.
Oh.
And so that evening is extremely difficult to completely come back to the whole evening. All I know is I was at his house. He lived directly next door to me, a friend of mine. My parents had went out for that evening, so I was home alone. I had been drinking. They were kind of they were giving me shots of wild turkey, and I had made it somewhere past the double digits on shots. And I remember somebody attempting to remove me from the house kind of forcefully.
Mm.
Then I don't remember anything. Then I remember being on top of our fence that connected the two houses, and like being all the way up on the very top of the fence. And, obviously I was intoxicated. I had no balance, and I fell off of the fence. Oh. I landed on my face, and my back proceeded to essentially come around to where the back of my head and my back were touching. Yeah, and then my head kind of just whipped itself back around, like out of that position. Miraculously, somehow I got up from this, walked over to my house, entered the front of the house. This is my wife's favorite part of the story, because she always loves the parenting thing. I dropped my keys on the ground, left the front door wide open, walked into the house, went to the restroom, and I remember looking at myself in the mirror and seeing the fact that I was like, I think I broke my nose, because my face was just blood and dirt. Mm-hmm. And like splashing water on my face, turning around, walking in my room, and collapsing on my bed. And the next thing I remember is waking up at some point in the night and thinking to myself how bad my back hurt, just the intense pain. And I experienced a lot of growing pains as a kid, so I just, in my head, the first thing was, I just need to go take a really hot shower. And I was in the restroom, and I'm standing in the restroom, and I realize my mom is yelling at me, and I'm like, why are you yelling at me? And she's like, I've been standing here for 10 minutes. And she's like, what are you doing? And I guess I was attempting to put my leg over the tub to get in the tub, and I couldn't do it. And I was like, I told her, I said, the dogs were acting up, and I had to try and fix the fence, and I fell off the fence. And I guess, like, the front of my legs where it caught the fence were completely raw.
Oh.
Where, like, it just had ripped down my legs. My face, like I said, my nose was swollen. And like I just said a second ago, when my parents came home, the front door was open. The keys were on the ground. They found me laying on the bed.
Oh.
They didn't do anything. And my mom basically was like, why don't you go lay down on the floor in the living room? You'll probably feel better. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go do that. And I remember waking up the next morning, and it's Father's Day, and my dad is sitting in his chair, and he's looking at me, and he's like, what's wrong with you? My dad was a very old school type of guy. It was that, you have the joke of the, if something's wrong with you, you fix it with duct tape or super glue or something. That was my dad. That's the kind of person he was. And he's like, what's wrong with you? And I remember looking at my hand and thinking to myself, I'm like, I can't feel half my hand. I'm like, half my hand on both sides is completely, I can't move my fingers. I can't. And he's like, well, come here, come over here and let's look. And I'm like, I can't get up. And he's like, what do you mean you can't get up? I'm like, I can't move. I can't get up. So long story short, they actually took me to amazing yet again. Here's the next one. For however he did it, he got a hold of his chiropractor on Father's Day. It was Sunday, Father's Day. Wow. And had his chiropractor come in, and they basically took me to him and put me in a collar and everything, and he put me through some different X-rays, traction, and different things, and basically told my parents one of my vertebra had completely the fifth vertebra had essentially completely come out of alignment with my spinal column, and was pinching my nerve to my actual spinal column. So I went through that summer. This is the very beginning of school. The very beginning of summertime. This is June. I barely had made it into summer. I spent over 2 months basically laying on the living room floor in traction, going to the chiropractor and having different things done with my neck. Where, as I was telling you previously, amazingly to find out years later that the trauma in my neck was obviously extremely bad, but because of the fact that they took me to a chiropractor and not like a hospital or something, no one ever looked at my lower back and saw the fact that when I had fell, I had compacted my lower back. And I had went through, years and years of just pain, different types of trauma from it. But I noticed I started experiencing things at that point too. I would get these massive headaches. After that, I had extreme sensitivity to, I was talking to you about, I've noticed, and I've never met anybody else who's like this, but I have extreme sensitivity to precious stones or anything in the sense like a quartz crystals, any type of crystals.
Which are all, as I said, very conductive of electricity. Right.
Which is funny because electricity, I've never had any type of sensitivity to electricity. I don't cause things to, I've listened to you talk about shorting out phones or shorting out laptops and such, or turning off, even like you've talked about turning off lights. I mean, even having that ability, and nothing else like that has ever happened to me. But it's strange. I have this, when I get around rocks like that, those types of crystals, I actually will get hypersensitive. I get kind of anxious. I get like almost like an energy charge from them. It's like I get like hyped up. Like I feel like a kid on, like a sugar high. But yeah, I had these night terrors, and like I said, I was actually just recently, it hasn't aired, but I was on Strange Familiars, and I talked about a reoccurring kind of a creature that I saw in my night terrors. But so after this accident, I've actually had some paranormal type things that I experienced as a teenager. I lived in Southern California where I grew up. It's south of Palm Springs, the Coachella Valley. It was kind of, at one point, it was very famous for the fact that it was kind of known as the Little Hollywood or something. Like a lot of the people that came from Hollywood came to that area, especially, Palm Springs.
Mm-hmm.
I lived directly next to a date grove and a citrus farm. And as a kid, we loved to go into that at night, and we would play ditch or like hide and seek.
Mm-hmm.
And we, multiple of us kids, would talk about afterwards these things that would follow us, or I don't want to use the word, they would ghost us essentially,
right,
through the date grove. And afterwards, we would talk about things like, we would be like, "Hey, I can't believe, you didn't call me out. You were just 2 aisles away from me, and you were sitting right there staring directly at me." And the other person would be like, I wasn't there. I never saw you. It's like, "No, yeah, you were. We were both staring right at each other. We were looking directly at each other. You were looking at me. You were just kind of hidden off in the shadow a little bit. And as soon as I started going, you ran after me in the just 2 aisles over." And the other person's like, "I was way over on the other side of the grove. I wasn't right there."
So that is so much like the first shadow person I saw in the one graveyard we went to, where we were literally playing hide and seek, and I thought it was my friend walking through the bushes, except I didn't hear anything. And when I got over there, I heard him yell from the other side of the graveyard, and was like, "Well, who the hell's that then?"
Right. No, and it got to the point where when we met new kids who would move into the neighborhood or something, it was kind of like an initiation during the summertime to go into the date grove at night. We were like, okay, if you go halfway, and the date grove it was probably 4 to 6 acres and, square. And we would be like, if you go in about halfway in the center, there's this huge, it was a contraption that they used for pulling the dates, but it was like it looked like a big construction that they put on the sides of the buildings, except it had like giant wheels on it because they would be able to move it. And so we would dare people to go to that. And, the kids would come, they'd only make it so far in, and they'd come running out, and they'd be like, "I know somebody was in there. One of the people, that watches the date grove, somebody was in there." And we're like, "Yeah, they live on the far west side of the grove, and it's like a family," because we knew it was just a husband and wife. Mm-hmm. And we're like, "There's no workers that actually live on the grove." So we're like, "Yeah, no, there was nobody in there." But I mean, I lived there until I was 18, and I had multiple experiences in that date grove. In fact, I had joined a martial arts class, and my martial arts instructor was very much into, he was a Christian, but he was very much into astral levitation. He talked about that all the time. He talked about kind of out-of-body experiences. Mm-hmm. He talked about, altered consciousness through meditation and such. And so that was kind of part of our classes, is we would do these meditation rounds where he would teach us these different meditation techniques and how to get ourselves to these different states of altered consciousness and stuff through meditation. And myself and my best friend who I was going through the class with, the two of us really latched on to the meditation and the idea of the altered consciousness. We were mid-teenagers, so I mean, we had both been reading Carlos Castaneda. We had, this is the mid-'80s. Right. We were kind of, the new age idea was kind of, at that time, was something that, was new, but it was, a lot of people were talking about it, and we, the two of us kind of had gotten into that. I mean, I remember that was when I bought my first tarot deck, was at that time and stuff. And we later on would purposely go into the date grove and just walk around by ourselves to see what we would see. And I mean, I saw many shadow creatures or shadow persons within that date grove. It was very alive, I guess you could say, with things happening.
I wonder why. I wonder what was special about that place.
Well, you know, the funny thing is my dad told me at one time, he had said that he had heard lots of stories that in the 20s and 30s, when Hollywood was just first getting built,
mm-hmm.
and the mafia had kind of come over to the West Coast, and they were looking at Hollywood. Then you move into the 30s and 40s, and they were a lot more entrenched in Hollywood. Palm Springs was kind of because of the fact that it was this vast desert. They owned quite a bit of property in that area, and there was a lot of stories that they utilized these date groves and such to bury bodies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we had a lot of Mexican mafia there in the desert, because we were about an hour and a half away from the border. And later on, see, now that would be years later. Mexican mafia then was a huge thing, where they actually moved into the valley, and they were known for purchasing property and businesses, and they would also purchase the name of the company as well, so that you did not know that property or that business had changed ownerships. And they would control that, and so there was a lot of things that happened in that valley through that too. So these could be stories. I don't know. I'll tell you what. Some of those date groves, they were vast. I mean, it would not shock me to have, a perfect spot to bury a body. I mean, growing up in that desert as a kid, if you had a 4-wheel drive vehicle, you could have went many places and buried a body. That place was very much known. In fact, my dad belonged to a 4-wheel drive group, and we would go out in the desert all the time on the weekends, like out in these areas where, you only get to with a 4-wheel drive. And we came upon one time a water tower, one of the old the first kind of metal water towers. Somebody had started something out there, and we were walking around it and noticed that somebody had cut a hole in the side of it. And I went into the water tower, and inside the water tower, they had glued or attached little shelves along the walls, and there was candles. There was, I don't know. I mean, I've read a lot of occult type stuff, so I really don't know. But there was a lot of symbols on the walls that were spray painted on the walls. There was an altar up in one area. It was pretty interesting. My dad actually made me get out of there before I could do any more exploring. But the place was, like I said, we're talking candles on the walls in the hundreds.
Wow.
Covering the walls of this thing. And up at the very front of it, there was this huge altar that somebody had made with candles. I mean, the wax melted all over it, so it had been used many, many times. So the desert was an interesting place to grow up as a kid.
I guess.
Then later, so in reference to my martial arts class, my teacher teaching us these things, around the age of 17, like I said, he had talked about astral projection. He had talked about the different forms of being able to leave your body and stuff. And I had become really interested in that. And reading the Carlos Castaneda books, you kind of read about that kind of thing. And so for me, it was this other world that I wanted to explore.
Mm-hmm.
And it fascinated me. Even, all the way from the time when I was a little kid, I remember I would take really hot baths, like really, really hot, so that, and just lay back. And I feel now, from what I've read and listening, I believe that I was able to actually have an out-of-body experience through the heat of the bath and the relaxation. I remember having experiences of laying back and seeing different colored lights, different types of geometric shapes, things moving around in the shapes. And I was able to do this just from relaxing and taking that bath as a kid. And it was something that I kind of, after I had done it a couple times, I tried to, I did it definitely easily half a dozen times when I was a kid. I did it and was able to get to this place where, and now I listen to things like people talking about being on, dimethyltryptamine and experiencing these like shapes and stuff. And it sounds so familiar to what I had experienced. So anyways, as a teenager, I wanted to my idea was to get back to something. I wanted to get back to that. I felt like I had experienced something previously. And so my teacher finally got to the point, after teaching me a lot of these different meditation techniques and such, he finally told me that he felt that, I should be ready to actually have my first out-of-body experience. And he said that what we were going to do, because we were a Friday night, he was like, tomorrow night on Saturday evening, at this time, I want you to start your preparation, which was a kind of a ritualistic type thing. I would drink a very large thing of hot, like mint tea, herbal tea, and have that relax down. And then I would go in a extremely dark room and I would put on shamanic drumming music and start my breathing technique. And he said he would do the same, and he would essentially leave his body, and what his goal was to help me be able to leave mine and kind of guide me in the astral plane. So Saturday evening comes, I do all my things. I go in my room, put on the shamanic drumming, and start to do the breathing. And a while into it, and I know I was not asleep because I can still remember counting my breaths or focusing on my breaths as I was doing the meditation. And I felt something in the room with me. And being ignorant and not really understanding a lot of these things, immediately I was like, I called out to my martial arts master thinking that it was him. And there was no response. And then suddenly I had something grab my chest and just intense pressure on my chest and start to push me into my bed. And I could feel the sides of my bed coming up around me, like around my arms and stuff. I could feel the bed, and I could feel the springs kind of doing that thing where they ping as they're being pushed beyond kind of what they're supposed to be.
Right.
And it felt like I stopped breathing. I was panicking, but I couldn't move any of my limbs. I was completely frozen in the spot, and this thing just pushed and pushed on me. And just as I felt like I was about to lose consciousness from the panic, from the not breathing, it let go, and I literally felt myself come up out of the bed, and like the springs and everything kind of lift me up and then come back down onto the bed. And everything came back into focus in the room. Music's still on. Everything is still, and I'm just like sitting there in the room having that, what happened to me? What was right. That? I know that obviously was not what was supposed to happen. As late as it was, I obviously couldn't get a hold of my instructor, so I waited till the next day and I got a hold of him. And before I even had a chance to tell him what happened, he was like, "Oh my God." He's like, I'm glad you got a hold of me. I'm so sorry. Yesterday afternoon, I got really sick from something. He's like, I don't know if it was something I ate or what, but I became so violently sick and was my stomach and everything else. He's like, I was bedridden and completely out of it. He's like, I never was able to meditate last night. How did you meditate? How did it go? And I explained the experience to him, and he was like, well, do you feel anything now? And I said, no, I don't feel anything now. I mean, it obviously freaked me out. And, you know, he was like, well, I don't think, he's like, maybe we should hold off and we shouldn't go any further at this time. So, cut to now, and like I told you earlier, I'm 46. I was 17 at that time. I have had whatever happened to me that night has continued to visit me, I guess you could say, several times a year throughout since that time. And it always starts off the same way. And I've noticed something particular about it was the fact that, Tim actually pointed this out to me when I said it, and I didn't realize it. It seems to only happen when I'm like really tired. Say like I put in like a super long day of work, and I'm just exhausted to where when you finally collapse, you just, you know, your whole body, it's just that, you know, it's just that exhausted to the point where you're just like, I have to, you know, I'm just gonna coma time, or, you know, if something very stressful is happening in my life and, you know, your mind does not want to shut down when you lay down to go to sleep and it just keeps going.
Right.
It only happens during those times. When I'm perfectly fine and I just want to lay down and go to sleep, I just lay down and go to sleep. But these other times, it always starts the same way. I'll feel the presence. I'll know that there's something there in the room with me. When I've opened my eyes, I've seen a shadow, roughly the size of I'm assuming a man. I get a male feeling from it, even though I don't know 100% if that's even accurate, but I get kind of a male feeling. My body becomes the same thing where it gets paralyzed, and, you know, I have my breathing gets kind of, I luckily haven't had really the chest. A couple times that's happened again, the pressure, but not as often. It's more of I've learned over the years, I ignore it. I will keep my eyes closed and I keep thinking to myself, you know what, if I don't look, there's nothing he can do. There's nothing he can do. I just keep my eyes closed and I'll be fine. I just lay here, just keep laying here, and, you know, eventually the cramping in my legs and the feeling of not being able to move, it'll go away.
And does it?
And it does. Eventually it does. But, so I was listening to your show, one of the episodes where you were talking about sleep paralysis, and Ren was actually on there, and you guys were talking about doing the whole thing of you have to confront these things.
Right.
I think Ren was talking about something. This is one I asked Tim, and I wasn't 100% sure. Something about, he explained a story about eating a witch or something at one point, didn't he?
Yes.
Something about, experiencing.
He encountered something in an out-of-body state, and he ate it.
Yes, and he ate it. You know, hey. So I'm listening, and I'm not the type of person who, I don't like to turn my back on things. I like to, I in the past, if I have an accident, I'm not the type of person who shies away from whatever that accident was and is like, you know, I'm not going to do that again. You know, it's like if I say, like when I was a kid riding a motorbike, if I crashed, I wasn't the type of kid that was like, okay, whoa, I need to step away from that. I was immediately back on the bike.
Right.
And was like, okay, no, let's go again. So I was like, you know what? Listening to Ren and everybody else, I'm like, you know what? That's right. That's exactly what I do. I need to tell this thing that it does not control me. It does not have any power over me. And, you know, I'm tired of it. It's been over 30 years living with this thing, and close to 30. And I'm done having these, you know, knowing that it's there. And so the next time I had an experience, I opened up my eyes and I looked right at it, and I told it that it did not control me and that it was not going to harass me any longer, and I was done with it. And it attacked me. And, yeah, I mean, it like, like attacked me to the point where my wife, she had to yell at me and like hit at me because she said I was yelling, I was like thrashing. Yeah, and finally I was able to wake up to the point where I was, realization of what had happened, and then I told her. And ever since her and I have been married, she's known about this experience. In fact, she's experienced it. She's felt the presence in the room.
Really?
Before. Yes. When it's happened to me, she's woken up and she's felt it. In fact, this is something that I don't remember her telling me before. And she actually has said that she has woken up and she has seen me interacting with it.
Wow.
Like, she's actually seen me speaking to it. Right?
Huh?
She's sorry. My wife is sitting across from me, and she looked up at me, and I'm like, "That's right, right?" But she's had that thing where she felt like she's had to try and wake me up, like try and like bring me. Even though she says she's actually experienced me with my eyes wide open, staring at a spot in the room, and looking at that spot and nothing there, and she's looking at me, and I'm just like staring directly at it. Just completely paralyzed, staring at this spot, and she's had that, like, you have that feeling, and you have that, and it's like, oh God, he's experiencing that again.
Wow.
So needless to say, after it attacked me, I didn't have any physical marks. The next day, I did feel exhaustion. I know I felt more than normal exhaustion. Obviously, it was something that stuck in my head for a while.
Right.
But that was the story that I had initially wrote you to come on the show, was that experience, because it's been such a huge part of my life, and it's connected to the show because of the fact that, listening to the show, I was like gung ho. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna tell this thing that I'm done with it, and I'm tired of it, being a part of my life, and I'm not gonna, needless to say,
I think with a lot of this stuff, though, intent matters. So if you didn't fully believe it when you said it, it may not have had the desired effect.
And I completely get that. And I am the type of person who, the other thing that, comes to it is the idea of belief, the idea of having the belief in something higher, the belief in a different. I am very much, my whole life, I have been a very, religion is something that has always been a big thing with me, as far as reading about it, as far as being skeptical, reaching out to other types of religions. That has been like a major life search that to this day, it changes. It's one of those, I'm very open-minded. I'm very, as far as, I've done everything. When I was, a teenager, because of that martial arts class and because of my, I reached out and I read the Bible on my, I just read the Bible and was like, but afterwards I still had that. And I even started going to church for a little while. It just didn't work for me.
Yeah,
it didn't feel right. It never connected with me. The same thing with the Bible. I read the Bible, and afterwards I was like, it just doesn't connect. For a while I got into Wicca, and I went out and bought easily 20 books and read as much as I could about, Wicca and everything else. And for a few years, I really, the natural aspect of it, the duality, the fact that, in nature, you see duality in so many things. So the duality made perfect sense to me, that there would be a dual sense of some type of a presence, some type of something, that's a creator type idea, but it's a dual personality creator or something. Then I read some other things, and Wicca kind of became, one of those, I just kind of set it off to the side. And I was reading a lot of Eastern philosophy, Buddhism type books. Same thing again. There's parts of it I understand. There's parts of it I get that I like. So I wonder in some ways, when I confronted this thing, it's not like I had a prayer that I could throw at it. It's not like I had a mantra that I could bring up.
Fair enough.
Hello? And I wonder if in some ways that was another where, like what you said, the exact same thing is the not having, the intent.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think that plays a big part of it, because if you doubt yourself, you're doing it because Ren said, confront it. I would say the same thing, but I mean, if you don't have the full intent behind it, that you're not confident about doing it, this stuff responds more to our subconscious than our conscious mind.
Right.
Ren and I are reckless with this stuff, quite honestly. I mean, we're just like, okay, let's try that,
Well, the funny thing is, like I said, I've had a lot of experiences. Even since I've been with my wife, we've had a lot of experiences. We've, when our son was first, so my mom, she lived in this house when I was 18, and then continued on to where I got married. We had our son, and my wife and I, when our son was first born, we moved in with her. Mm-hmm. And I had lived in this house. We moved in to save money to buy a house. And prior to that, I had lived in this house for a little while. This house was built in the 50s. And everyone who ever came in the house experienced, there was a hallway, and people would come up to us and they would be like, "Is there somebody else here?" And we're like, "Other than us? No, why?" And they're like, "I just saw somebody standing at the end of the hallway." And we were like, "Oh yeah, that's the guy that lives in the house." He's, it's like he's, it was one of those types of things. We always experienced, everyone saw this shadow figure at the end of the hall. And we had different experiences in that house. We have, my wife had actually come home at one point from work, and she went into our bedroom off the hallway and threw off her shoes, and then went to go take a shower. And coming back out of the shower, she goes to go in the room, and she's like, "Jamie?" And I'm like, "Yeah." "Have you been in the room? Did you mess with my shoes?" And I'm like, "I've been sitting here in the living room. No, I haven't went in the room." So I go in the room with her, and her shoes were in the center of our floor. And they were up against the cabinet. They were sitting perfectly straight up and down on their toes. And we actually have a photograph of this.
Nice.
We took a photograph of it. We also have a photograph of dropping a piece of paper in the living room, and the piece of paper landed on the ground perfectly straight up and down and just stood there. And long enough for us to get a camera and take a picture of it, and just perfectly standing up and down on the ground. And we tried doing it again, and I mean, it did exactly what a paper should do. Right. It hit and folded. Every single time it hit the ground and it folded over.
Does all this stuff happen when you're around?
Well, so here's the funny thing. I believe that my wife, in a sense, has some over it, because she has quite a bit of poltergeist things that happen around her. She is notorious for having things fly off of cabinets and such at her. We've all witnessed it. My son's witnessed it. I've witnessed it. I mean, literally witnessed something that was in a non-moving state and then just come off of it and hit her.
Huh.
So no, it doesn't always happen. In fact, my wife had an experience at the house that we live in now. I'm not going to say it because it's not my place to say it for her. Myself and my son at the time I was still working in the Southern California when we had moved here to Central California. So she was home alone, and she actually had an experience unlike anything she's never had an experience like that again, but it was kind of a shocking experience for her. being home alone and everything and having something happen.
Right.
Which in this house that we live in now is not common, other than the things coming at her, which is her, because it's happened at several other locations where we've lived. Those things have like come off of shelves and hit her.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, in the house that we live in right now, it's funny. I don't know. I think I've talked to other people, and I've heard other people explain this. Closets. Have you ever heard, like, do you get a lot of people who comment about closets just being a negative energy space, like a space that just has some kind of a weird energy?
I don't know that I've heard other people talk about it, but I know my closet has some damn weird energy.
Okay, so the house that we lived in the desert, we were told that a man had, the previous owner had actually passed away in the house when we bought the house. It was one of those where they have to disclose it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We in our closet, my wife and I would be sitting in the living room, and I would hear the closet door open and close. I would hear talking, and then I would talk to my wife, and I was like, "How come you got up and went in the closet?" And she's like, "I didn't get up and go in the closet." and I'm like, "Did you hear the closet?" And she's like, "No." Vice versa, the same thing. If you were home alone, you would hear that closet door. We actually put a recorder by the closet when we had left home, and when we came back, you could hear voices, and you could hear shuffling type of sounds.
Wow.
So now we come to this house in Central California where we live now, and the closet in our bedroom, my son has made the same comment. It's a creepy closet. It's just like you and that's, my wife just made a really good point. Standing there, looking at it, walking into it, you're perfectly fine. The second you turn around and you put your back to it and you start to walk out, that's when you feel it. Like, it feels very, like, ominous. But it's strange to us that two houses, we've had a closet where it's just bizarre that the closet has felt that way. Nothing else in the house feels anything remotely, but we've had that.
Well, you figure, little kids always see things in the closet too, so maybe there's something to what they're afraid of, that they're picking up energy that we're just usually ignoring. Right?
Because, look at movies, like you just said. Even look at something like that. Poltergeist. Where's the main thing in that movie? It's in the closet.
Yeah.
Well,
and I also wonder if it's a matter of, it's a closed area, so energy doesn't flow through it. Energy flows into it and stops.
Right.
If you look at the what's it called, feng shui?
Yes.
And you can definitely feel the difference in a house where the energy moves versus one where it's set up where it doesn't. Or at least I can. So maybe maybe it pools in a closet, and that's why that stuff, feels like that.
Yeah. And the majority of closets that you enter, especially in an older home, you're not going to find another door leading out of that closet. You're not going to find a window maybe going outside in that closet. So, I get what you're saying about the fact that it's a closed-in space. Literally, the door, and all of us know from our childhoods, we, even to this day, I know majority of adults, we all close our closet door at night.
Yep.
It's just an instinctive practice. It's like before you go to bed, you walk over and you close that closet door. You don't ever want to leave that closet door open when you're sleeping.
True.
Which, it's funny. But, we have that experience here at this house, just that closet. And then, obviously, for me, it's having this, whatever it was that the only thing I can say is whatever I invited into my life. That's the only way that I can express. That's the only way I can express it. Is I was inexperienced when I went to do the attempt to do astral levitation, attempting to leave my body.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what I was doing, and I have a feeling that I invited something in.
It's quite possible.
And I find it interesting the fact that it seems like it only has the attempt to really come and present itself, or how it in the room when there's certain types of my consciousness is at a weakened or a lower level. That's when I seem to experience it.
Well, so you said a lot of times it's when you're really exhausted and such, but you've been trying to stay awake because you're doing stuff, right?
Right, correct.
So one of Ren's techniques for out-of-body travel is, he said, he will sit there and read or whatever while he's falling asleep, and then force himself back awake. And what it does, at least I think what it's doing to facilitate this, is that it's making your conscious mind stay awake, because you're forcing it when your body goes to sleep, hence enabling that lucid dream state, the out-of-body state, so on and so forth. So when you're doing what you're doing, I think what's happening is your mind is almost afraid to fall asleep because you've been forcing it to stay awake, and your body zonks out. So now you're in this altered state, where you're more vulnerable.
Right. Well, I mean, and it's funny because, I mean, months will go by where I won't even think about it, and until the experience happens again. Right. And I won't even, I consciously won't be thinking about it. I won't have any, and then it happens.
And martial arts too. I mean, that is very related to moving energy.
Correct. And I was doing, as I got higher ranking, and I actually, I before I had stopped doing that at a younger age, I was a second degree black belt, and I had gotten into doing a lot of forms where literally the actual forms that I were doing was with the intention of creating energy to be able to, to release it at essentially the end of the form that you do. Right. Right. And things. So, I mean, manipulation of energy was something that I was very, interested in when it came to that. And then, go ahead, sir.
Oh, no, go ahead.
For me, it's funny. I reference, I don't know, do you know the Dan Millman, the Way of the Peaceful Warrior?
I've heard of it. I don't think I've read it.
So he wrote, the first book he wrote was Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and it's his idea of, as he was in college, he met this character who called himself Socrates, and he believes that this person was not a person, it was an entity who essentially taught him ways to overcome, and it's funny in some ways, after listening to you, I bought the Seth Speaks books, because how interesting that sounded to me. But in a way, it's almost kind of the same thing. It's something else that's not of this world necessarily, attempting to kind of try and explain some of the things. Yeah.
From a different viewpoint.
Exactly. And that's kind of the way that the Way of the Peaceful Warrior, there's Path of the Peaceful Warrior, but he, as soon as he graduated college, and this person was not part of his life anymore, this entity, he got married, he had a family, and for a good 15, 20 years, literally all those things that he had learned and that path that he had been taking, all those things, it disappeared. And then when later in life, when his kids were older and those things, all of a sudden it came back. And I feel very much, I feel empathy towards him in the sense that I feel the same way. I was heavily into the martial arts. I was heavily into wanting to understand Native American beliefs, spiritual type of beliefs. I was, reading the Carlos Castaneda books. I was reading other types of books on spirituality, on occultism. And then I met my wife. We had our son, and it was like that became the focus of my life. Right. And a lot of these things got set off to the side. Now, I still had the paralysis, the sleep paralysis, this thing. I still had those experiences during that time. But I would say, I mean, some of those other things did happen. I mean, we did live in the one house where we saw there was the thing at the end of the hall, and we had those couple things happen in that house. But it was funny. It was different than it was before because, I don't know, in that sense, it was yet again, we had a small child. It was that, okay, let's,
Right, your focus is different.
Yes. And the thing in that house, none of us ever felt anything negative towards it. It never felt like it was anything. The only thing it ever really did, honestly, to a person in the house that I can remember was my niece was babysitting our son. We were at work, and her and our son were sitting on the couch, and
I lost you.
Oh, that's right. Oh, sorry. My wife said something. That was me. My wife said something to me. So, my niece, it scared her. So the shadow figure actually scared her to the point where she would only sit on the very corner of the couch where she could see down the hallway because she had it in her mind. There was no way that something was going to happen that I was not going to see. Mm-hmm. And so one of the days when she was babysitting her son, the couch where she was sitting actually moved away from the wall.
Wow.
A good distance because she left it. It was about a foot. She left it until we came home, and she had that, like, I don't want to be left here alone.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. She was like, I did not move this couch. She's like, we were both sitting on it, and it moved. And that was the only thing that thing ever did. And it's one of those experiences where when we weren't there, my mom is one of those types of people where if you say something to her directly, she'll respond with a, oh yeah, I've seen it. But if you don't, she would never tell a soul that she saw something. And she would also kind of go about like it was in one ear, out the other. To her, she never paid attention to it. It's just like, it's the idea of it's the idea of, I know you guys have talked about on the show before, and I mean, I've had this experience. I lived briefly out of high school with some buddies in this house, and which used to be a day grove where this house was built. At one time, it was a day grove, and I was in my room, and something made me. It's one of those things where you wake up, and I looked over next to the bed, and there was this figure standing next to my bed, and I looked at it, and I was like, Ron, why are you in my room? Who was one of my roommates? And I said it to the figure, turned around, and went right back to sleep.
Huh. The
next morning, I woke up and thought to myself, okay, wait a minute. Why would he be in my room? I know that unless there's something else going on here that I don't know about, I'm pretty sure that he would not be just standing over my bed staring at me.
Right.
And the more I thought about it, I was like, I don't think that thing had legs.
Huh.
I think it was an upper torso. And
interesting.
What? And so I actually saw Ron, and I was like, just curiosity. I'm like, you weren't in my room last night by chance, were you? And he's like, no. But so it's that reaction of you see something and you have that, oh, that's weird, and then you go right back to sleep.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my mom. She's like, it's like that, see something, oh, okay, and then the next second it's gone.
Huh.
She just has that kind of a rational mind, I guess, where her mind doesn't accept it.
Right.
So she just lets it go.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the people who say they don't have experiences, that might be what's happening to them. They're having experiences, but it's just not registering. Their brain's just choosing to filter it out.
I agree. I totally agree with that statement, because I have been in that position where, you're in a group of people, like I've heard you guys all, you, Joshua, and and Timothy and stuff, all you guys talking about, it's like you're in a group of people, and the majority of the people are like, yeah, no, nothing's ever happened to me. No, I've never had anything happen. And then you start to tell a story about something happening, and somewhere during you telling that story, the person's like, oh, well, you know what? There was one time.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. It's like, you're always the one person in the room who has a story to tell or something,
Yeah.
and everybody else claims that they don't. So I have a couple UFO experiences also.
Yeah, let's talk about them.
So
and that'll probably bring us almost up to the end, I think. So let's go over those.
So as a teenager, yet again, the guy that was my best friend, who I was in the martial arts class with, we had a routine on Saturdays, because high school, we were still in high school at this time, where in Palm Desert, where we lived and where we were growing up, we lived probably about 5 miles from downtown Palm Desert, and we would walk, and uptown we always had a pizza place where we ate our pizza. We listened to our jukebox. We then went to the movies. As soon as we got done with the movies, we would kind of take our time meandering back. We would always stop at like a convenience store, get some stuff, and make it back to my house just in time to, I don't know if you remember this from the 80s or not, but on the movie channel, Joe Bob Briggs Drive-In, he had a show on there.
Yeah.
he had a thing on there that was called the boob counter, where he would tell you how many times during the movie you got to see. So that was kind of like our destination, was to make it back home in time to watch Joe Bob Briggs. And we're walking home one night, and up in the sky, let's see, where I was standing, it would have been probably a southwest direction. There was a really bright star, what appeared to be a really bright star, and it suddenly shot across the sky to the point where if we're looking, it would have been a point where easily it covered a distance of maybe 4 to 5 feet in the sky, looking wise, and then stopped at a point, did like a flash, like a really bright flash, turned in a 90-degree angle, went another about 4 or 5 feet, did a bright flash, stopped, and then shot back again in another direction, almost completing what I would assume would be like a triangle type pattern. Really good size. And both myself and him, it was one of those moments where we stopped, we kind of looked at each other, and we both had that, did you see that? It's like, okay, I saw it. Okay, yeah, let's just keep walking. And neither one of us really commented on it that night after that. It was so, it's one of those things that's just so, what is it? And, you have no idea. And I mean, like I said, the distance that it covered in the sky was large enough to where, and it covered that space in seconds. So, the speed that it would have had to have been traveling at to cover that in that amount of distance when you're looking at the sky is, it's impossible at our standards.
Yeah, right. And this was in the 80s, so, it's possible the technology existed somewhere, but this falls more under the anomalous sort of thing to me, I would think.
Right. Well, you know what? Okay, so now, having listened to a lot of the podcasts, having read a lot, and the different shows and things and listening, I kind of wonder if it sounds in a way to me like the triangle ships, the large triangle ships that people experience seeing, if it was at a far enough distance in the sky from where we were standing and had a light that literally traveled along its perimeter, it would have formed the same shape.
Okay. But that movement, that quick sudden movement, isn't generally associated with the triangles.
Right. But right. Well, what I'm talking about is the triangle. What if the triangle was not moving? What if it was literally the ship, and I just saw what we saw was just a light on the perimeter of it moving.
Oh, well, that's certainly possible.
Outlining the shape of it.
Yep.
Ever since I've heard about the triangle ships, that's kind of been something that I've wondered, is if it was just far enough away from us to where what we saw was just a light that was literally on the outside of the ship, or whatever it is, traveling around the outside of it, essentially forming, the outside of it.
That's an interesting idea. It could be.
That's just something that I've, after listening and reading so many different accounts, when you're reading, Jacques Vallée, you read all these different ones, and you read about the different shapes and everything. Ever since I've heard about the pyramid or the triangle-shaped ship, that has been something that I've thought about, and I've been like, wow, that kind of... Now, I don't know if because of how long ago I'm just putting that in, and it just now in my brain, the way it works now, that works for me, and I'm like, oh, that sounds right. But, yet again, it's another thought.
Yeah, and it's hard to ever know for sure because it's so long in the past.
Right. So then, 2018, summer of 2018. I live on the Central Coast. I'm literally 20 minutes from the Pacific Ocean where I live, and at that time I worked at a location that was about 45 minutes south of where I am, and part of my drive is the 101, which just runs right along the ocean. And I was coming home one night, and it was right after dusk, so the sun had just went down on the Pacific Ocean, and it was that getting dark. Directly to the east of me, there are hills that run along there. Above those hills, I saw from my Jeep, it would have been looking out to the east from my Jeep, easily the size of an orange, if not somewhere closer to even almost a grapefruit. Over in that direction, with a massive tail coming off the back of it. So a comet or like a meteorite type looking debris, something coming in. But the colors, it was reds and blues and yellows, and I mean just so bright that it lit up everything around it. And it came completely across, because I was driving in a northerly direction. It was going from a south to north direction. And it did not do what normally when you're looking at a meteorite, some type of debris coming into the atmosphere, where you watch it, it flares, and then it dims, and then it goes out. Right. This didn't do that. It kept going until I lost view of it, because of entering towards the area that I was enters into like a valley. And so you have hills on both sides of you, and it obscured my shot of it. Afterwards, for weeks, I was all over the local news and everything, trying to figure out what I had seen. And there was no reports of it. There was nothing on anything. And something that big,
should have been
and
reported.
I mean, exactly. And I mean, I came home and I was like, to my wife and my son, I was like, oh my God, what I just saw. I'm like, the whole time, the rest of the drive home, I was just sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to tell somebody. Like, this thing was just the most impressive I've ever seen. The colors on it, like I said, you have to imagine the brightest on the spectrum of those colors. That's the colors that it was, of those reds and yellows and blues.
Right. And that doesn't sound completely different from the UFO I saw, at least light-wise, because, yeah, it was all prime colors.
Uh-huh.
and they were so bright.
Did it have a did yours did it have a tail like that? Like the
No, mine was sitting
okay.
still.
Okay. Yeah, and I told you earlier before we were recording that I live about an hour north of Vandenberg Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
And it is known on the West Coast that is probably one of the most active bases as far as they launch rockets from there all the time, test rockets. The Tesla, his stuff is launched from there, the SpaceX.
Right.
But we have seen so many things launched and then re-enter our orbit from that base that we have a pretty good understanding of the trajectory that those things are going. One of the reasons that Vandenberg is so big is because, well, the ocean is right next to it. So if they launch something up and it's coming back down, they usually don't worry because it's going to come down in the ocean.
Right.
And this thing was traveling completely in the opposite direction of Vandenberg. And I even actually went and I checked Vandenberg records to see if there was anything launched at that time. And there was no records of anything being launched. So move forward to this past Monday, I actually had the pleasure of being on Strange Familiars with Timothy Renner. And after speaking to him that night, I left and went to get my family and I food. And it was later in the evening. It was close to 9. When I was coming home, across the sky from more of an east direction to a west direction, I saw what would appear to be like a shooting star, some type of fragment or something coming in, but it was like a bright green. And watched it start from one horizon to the other until it was out over where the ocean would be, and then I lost sight of it. And after thinking to myself, what an interesting, synchronicity to pair with the fact that I just got done talking about things, to see that above me there was a military helicopter that went from black to all of a sudden the red lights and everything came on it, and you could tell it picked up speed and headed directly in the direction of where I saw the object go.
Yeah, that's weird. I mean, just
so that was
the timing of that is fantastic.
That's what I said when I came home. I looked at my wife and I'm just like, I'm all these things, they just happen in such perfect timing. It's just, so funny how it happens.
It's the universe in agreement with you.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's the cosmos talking to you. Yeah. So, and that again, this whole week I've been looking at the news reports, nothing. And the last launch that they had at Vandenberg was on the 1st. So Monday would have been the 6th.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that was just...
And of course, impossible to tell anything definite about, which is always the problem with this stuff. Like the timing is interesting, and it probably had an effect on you because of the timing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But what else are you supposed to say? I mean, it's just, I saw an anomalous light in the sky.
Yeah.
And was it strange?
Even if it wasn't something anomalous, its timing had an effect on you. You know what I mean?
Correct. And then the helicopter was just one of those things where you go, huh?
Yeah.
That's when you have that moment where you're like, that's interesting. Boy, what a coincidence is that helicopter was just sitting up there in black, like all its lights out.
Mm-hmm.
Cruising along, and then all of a sudden I see this, and then this helicopter goes full, the red lights, everything comes on it, and it picks up. And I pulled up to our house and stood there and watched it until it went over the horizon exactly where I saw the object go, and it disappeared.
Wow. So, you said you did do a show with Strange Familiars.
I did. Yes, I did. And I think that won't be out until a little bit later because Tim and I we're going to actually talk again and record a couple extra things some new things that I had in relation to what we talked about.
Okay, all right. But you talked about different stuff on Strange Familiars.
I did. I did talk about the paralysis, the sleep paralysis. That was one of the things. But the main reason I went on his show was a synchronicity of listening to his show and having a listener, one of his listener stories, this person describing a nightmare creature that he experienced as a child, and just floored me because it was down to, I mean, a T. Experiences that I had as a child with night terrors and seeing this same thing. We'll let that reveal come on Strange Familiars.
Yeah. But thank you for doing this, talking about all this stuff. You have very fascinating experiences. I'm especially fascinated by the fact that you seem to have an opposite effect with drawing energy from crystals and stuff rather than like putting out energy.
Right, and that's where with you, with listening to the stuff on the Kundalini and that the traumatic incident that happened to me early on, I've looked into it, and I kind of wonder if in some way I'm experiencing some type of a Kundalini experience with that.
Well, there is positive and negative energy with Kundalini. It goes, the traditional sense, it goes up one side of the spine hot, and then it comes down the other side cold.
Right.
Some people who have it get very, very cold. I'm one of the people who gets very, very hot. So maybe
I increase. You can ask any member of my family. When I walk into a house, I increase the temperature of the house by 1 degree. I've challenged people and had them, because they've been like, "There's no way," friends of ours, "There's no way that happens," and I'm like, okay, next time I come over your house, look at the temperature when I come in. And then after about 5 or 10 minutes, go look at the temperature again. And it increases by about a degree. My wife, she never has to worry about a heating blanket, she says, because I'm a furnace.
Yes, I've heard that too. So I would say there's probably something going on, but it's probably because of the way it woke up. It might be very unusual. Right.
And I wonder too. And then I wonder I told you about the medical procedure that I had done. If that messed with it in any way, possibly, or something.
Could be. And
I mean, that could have.
That could have what?
Trapped. That could have even essentially trapped energy. Who knows if those pain receptors, those nerve endings, are not a way for our body to also release the trapped energy.
Yeah, it's a possibility. I mean, it's something we don't know that much about because the materialist science of the day today doesn't look at energy, and until they start accepting that there's energy involved, they're only looking at one part of the equation.
Right.
I mean, they have the materialist side of it down pretty well. Now they just got to open up a little bit and look at some of the more, not so materialistic side of things.
Yeah, and I mean, we can all cross our fingers and we can hope. We can hope that maybe we're coming up on a. When I know I've listened to you say this, or somebody on your show say this about the fact that you go through these, even in academic circles, they go through these cycles where you have paradigms, you have specific people that have been the leaders of that structure, and they're the ones who control how it is, seen, or what is going to happen. And then slowly, as those people get out of it and they retire, they no longer, and you get these other people coming up, maybe, in the world where we're seeing Graham Hancock, actually getting, some recognition for the things that he's figured out. Same thing with, you have Andrew Collins writing the things that he's writing about, Robert Schoch.
Yep.
You have all of these guys, and this stuff is actually getting proven. Maybe we have these people that are coming up through. Yes, maybe we have some hope that some of these people that are coming up through the structure, through the system, are going to be the ones that are going to be willing to do those things.
Well, let's hope.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for sharing these stories with us.
Thank you for having me on. a huge fan. So this has been all my pleasure.
And Where Did the Road Go would not be possible without the help of our Patreons, and especially those patrons pledging $10 or more: Allison Cook, Lindsay Marie Trebet, Nick Martin, Super Inframan, UFO Weekly News, Tim, 36 Dingo, Maria, Jennifer Campbell, Mike McGuire, American Rambler, Paul Buscini, Nate Seriah, Anthony Sullivan, Kevin, John Rutledge Foster III, Eric Citron, Ben Crow, Janet Runyon, Andy McNamara, Sasha Lorg, Matthias Sunby, Christopher Vaughn, Riker and Stark, Robert Groom, Sean Cosgrove, Jose A., Roger Gonzalez, Craig Cicernos, Kevin Schreck, A.E. Gaia-Quinta, William Lovelace, Mark Brady, Chris, Ice a Hot Dog a Sandwich, John Eddy, Carla Mahoney, and Chris Johnson. Thank you all so very much. All right, if you have a story you'd like to talk to us about on the air, write me at stories@wheredidtheroadgo.com. And if you just want to tell us the story and have us discuss it like we do as well, that's also fine. You don't have to come on the air if you don't want to. But we're always interested in people's stories and seeing where they go from there. And I think this stuff is important to share. Remember, if you want to help us out and support us, become a patron. It's only $3 a month. Click on the patron link on wheredidtheroadgo.com. You get extra content all month long. And this month in particular, there was a over 2-hour conversation with Jeff Ritzman and I, picking out the common factors in so much paranormal stuff and trying to put together sort of a picture of what might actually be going on. So if that interests you, go become a patron. And it really does help us out a lot. And we'll see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.